there was just no understanding of how certain foods can contribute, if overconsumed, to disease. And it was just these learnings. I was just like, wow, this is really serious, because I never had any idea that what you eat could contribute to, your disease risk or potential disease states. I had no idea.
I am excited to be introducing a new guest today, Jeffrey Boadi. Jeffrey is a really fantastic advocate of healthy plant-based whole food nutrition, and he's got a fantastic Instagram site where he shares a lot of wisdom, brilliant recipes, makes it really accessible to people in a very user-friendly way. And he's also got an amazing website, The Health of Wealth. I invited Jeffrey onto my channel because I think so many people now are becoming very well aware of the relationship between the food that we eat and our health, and how making choices for what we do today can have a big impact on our future health. I love Jeffrey's way of explaining himself. His website and his Instagram are great. I got a lot out of this interview where we're looking at myth busting and misconceptions around plant-based or vegan diets. So I hope you find it useful. Please do let us know in the comments or the reviews below. And as always, stay curious and stay free. Right, I am really happy tonight to introduce a new guest to my channel, Jeffrey Boadi. Now, we are going to be having a fascinating discussion tonight about myths and misconceptions around plant-based and vegan diets and all things health and food related. And I've been following your work, Jeffrey. I was introduced to you by my daughter on Instagram for a long while now. Your Instagram page, the link will be below, is absolutely fantastic. So many helpful tips, beautiful recipes, lots of education on there as well. So thank you so much for joining us. And how are you doing this evening?
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure to be part of this and looking forward to the conversation. And as far as how I'm doing, yeah, I'm doing really well. Good start to the week. So yeah, can't complain.
Fantastic, fantastic. So, I mean, we're going to be talking a lot about health-related issues today. And can you give us a little bit of a background into, your story and where your passion for the relationship between health and food stemmed from?
So it was actually really interesting. So I'd kind of grown up, I'd always had like a sporting background. So I played a lot of sport growing up in school, rugby, football, tennis, cricket, swimming. So like multi-sport athlete when I was growing up. And I guess at that time, the only thing that was in my mind was that I needed as much meat that I could get for protein and to build muscle, calcium for milk and these things like that. And my kind of wider understanding of nutrition was pretty limited, to say the least. And that's actually being kind. So it's kind of around 2017, I started to become a bit more kind of open to learning about just life in general. I was going through a few transitions in my life, career-wise, relationships and things like that. And I'd been advised to watch a documentary on Netflix called What the Health. And I watched it, and I'm sure people have kind of heard about it. And I always do say that documentaries can be pretty biased when it comes to nutrition and when it comes to health. But for me, watching it was a bit different. It was almost a catalyst for me to go down the rabbit hole myself and do a lot of the research and do a lot of the kind of learning and reading books and watching videos about how to optimize a plant-based diet and how it could be beneficial for your health. Obviously, couple that with like changing my diet completely overnight, like completely cutting out all animal products. And bearing in mind, I'd been a heavy meat eater growing up, lots of eggs, lots of fish, chicken, beef, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was that kind of process. And really it was a case of, as I said, going down the rabbit hole, doing the research, doing the learning, and in terms of how I could optimize it for health and well-being. And I still wanted to be able to perform well in the gym, perform well if I was on the football pitch or the tennis court, still be able to kind of be fit, strong, healthy, build muscle, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was a kind of process, and obviously figuring out which foods to get into your diet, which foods to remove, what nutrients you need. So that's really kind of how I got like really passionate about it and really into it. And as I said, I think in terms of how the recipes have kind of evolved, it was really a process of finding all of these different foods that I'd never really like heard of, even foods that are quite simple, like quinoa, for example. Like for me, it seems very normal, but I'd never really got into that while I was, eating the way that I was eating before. So yeah, it's been a real interesting process in the journey, and just been sharing that with the community on social media.
Fantastic. So I just want to probe you a bit more about back in 2017 when you watched that documentary. Did it trigger something in it where you thought there's some truth here? Actually, I've got to look into it, because you weren't suffering from any health conditions at the moment. Obviously, there's lots of different reasons, which we'll come on to, for people that choose to go plant-based for all sorts of different reasons. But watching that documentary, what made you think, I mean, that's drastic, going cold turkey, so excuse the pun, and cutting out all animal products straight away. Where did that determination or desire come from?
Do you know what? I mean, just to touch on what you mentioned there, it wasn't a case of, I didn't have any kind of health issues or anything like that. I don't know. I felt like I'm watching it. And as I said, when I think about it, there was a lot of bias in the documentary. Like they made some claims which I didn't agree with, or thought were useful whilst watching it. But it was just a case of like, I don't know, I felt almost I was able to get an understanding of nutrition for myself.
Yeah.
And maybe like obviously take certain things and be like, okay, maybe I can go and research into that. And I almost felt like I'd now had, okay, I can kind of learn about nutrition and kind of do it my own way, maybe. Let's see. And to be honest, I could have been like, let me cut down on my meat consumption, and I probably would have still been pretty healthy. But I don't know, sometimes I can be quite drastic when it comes to certain things. If I feel like I come across information that I feel could be impactful for me, I'll just make the change and then kind of figure it out as I go along. So yeah, I think it was, there was certain political things that happened with like the meat industry and, different lobbying groups in the US, which I'm sure happens in the UK as well. And it was almost like an eye opener as to how, there was just no understanding of how certain foods can contribute, if overconsumed, to disease. And it was just these learnings. I was just like, wow, this is really serious, because I never had any idea that what you eat could contribute to, your disease risk or potential disease states. I had no idea. So yeah, it was kind of just coming across all that information and just being like, wow, I can actually, modify my diet, yes, somewhat drastically at the time, and potentially have even better health. I wouldn't say I was in bad health back then at all. I just didn't really have much of an idea about health beyond, eating as much animal protein as I possibly could. So yeah, it was a really interesting process. And as I said, it really just kind of hit a nerve for me watching that. Even though, as I mentioned, there was a lot of hyperbole in some of the claims that were made, but there was more than enough for me to be like, you know what, let me dive deep into this and see if I can, gain some value from it. And I guess I have.
It's fantastic. And I think that's such an important message, because so many people make quick decisions without really delving into it themselves. And diet is very controversial. And I would say the purpose of Jeffrey and I talking today isn't to try and convince anyone to do anything. It's to share how you can really look at some of these issues yourself and decide what's right for you. Because we all know, unfortunately, the state of the food industry now, in lots of different ways that we're going to come on to, is pretty atrocious for most of us. So let's dive straight into it then. I love your description of the difference between vegan and plant-based. Let me tell the listeners what your take on that is.
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, we have to understand that veganism is an ethic, first and foremost. It is the, refraining from utilizing any kind of animal products, whether it be for food, consumer goods, clothing, et cetera. Now, if someone for the majority of people who kind of adopts that more of an ethical standpoint, and I've got obviously respect for people who do that, provided that they don't, push it in people's faces. I think we do have to remember that they may not be considering optimizing their diet as a part of that. They might just think, I'm going to just remove animal products from my plate and remove animal products from my shoes and things like that. And I'm happy to go ahead and survive on, Oreos or, vegan nuggets or all these other processed, replacement foods that we're seeing nowadays. There's nothing wrong with that. If people want to do that, that's fine. But as I said, being vegan tells me what you don't eat. But being plant-based, whole food plant-based, as we call it, tells me what you do eat. That tells me that you're prioritizing, removing animal products from a perspective of trying to optimize your health. And that would include a variety of fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, whole grains, and legumes. Those are the foods that you're going to be prioritizing every single day. And you can add like mushrooms in there and a few other bits as well. So I think if someone tells me that they're plant-based and they focus on the health side of things, and it could be an extension of their ethics. I know that, many people who are ethical vegans but eat a whole food plant-based diet. So that's very clear in terms of how they want to do both sides of things, and I think that's great. I do worry sometimes for I guess the people who are just primarily vegan, who maybe aren't, they remove meat from their plate and automatically think that that's, the job done. Of course, from an ethical standpoint, that's, they're serving themselves well, but from a nutritional standpoint, because you also have to look after yourself, in my opinion, I think it's a really good idea to be a healthy advocate and a healthy champion for your cause. You wonder if Oreos and all these different foods, which are technically animal free, but are devoid of any nutrition. So there can be a big difference between the two. And I guess it's just a case of how people approach it, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this is one of the myths I wanted to start with, is that all vegans or plant-based people eat junk food.
Yeah.
And I must say it's quite a trigger for me. Yeah, I know, mean that it's my issue to deal with. But I know a lot of people that eat animal products that live off junk.
Yeah.
So it goes with all sorts of diets, particularly in modern society where convenience is the name of the day. So talk us through your thoughts on that, about junk food in general, whether you're a meat eater or not.
Well, this is the thing. I think that is often the case where, someone decides to shift to a plant-based diet and they might be eating some of these meat alternatives. People might start to think, oh, it's just all vegans eat is junk food. And I think the reason why that perspective or that perception exists is because of the aggressive marketing of a lot of these, vegan replacement meat products. Like if you go on the underground in London, for example, you'll see adverts for, this is bacon, some vegan bacon, and you'll see adverts for these other Impossible burgers and all of this other stuff. And what that's doing is it's kind of building the picture that anyone who decides to go vegan is going to eat these foods and these foods only. And a lot of people do. And I don't think that's a very good strategy, because the likelihood is that you're not really going to get the key nutrients that you do need to actually feel any kind of, to feel decent on a plant-based diet. And then you might end up just going, you know what, I'm just going to go back to what I felt was, normal for me. So that's really it. And I think one of the things is that people need to understand is that it's going to become, over the years, as all these more meat products come out, or more meat alternative products come out, and all these other vegan replacement foods come out, it's actually going to be, if you're not aware and if you don't have the discernment, it's actually going to be quite difficult to become or to be a healthy vegan, particularly if you're starting out, because you're just going to be bombarded with, oh, eat this bacon, or do this vegan chicken, or whatever it may be. So for me, I think the best way to do a diet that's free from animal products is to focus on the whole foods. Be a healthy champion of the cause. Even if you are someone doing it from a primarily ethical standpoint, you're going to feel great. And actually, what you're going to do is you're going to radiate a certain, you might not want to radiate a certain level of health, but naturally, if you're going to start to speak about something that you're passionate about, you also want to radiate that as well, because it's one thing to speak about something, but if you actually look the part, if you actually, are the example of what you're demonstrating, then people are more likely to maybe listen to you. Do you know what I mean? So, and I think that will be done if you focus on the whole foods, the fruits, getting the vegetables in, nuts and seeds, whole grains, legumes. Like, these are foods that are going to provide you with a ton of nutrients, and different ways to find, different ways to get used to cooking as well. So, and again, that's one thing that I was never a cook before I went plant-based, and now I'm creating all these recipes, which is crazy. So
I'm going to come on to that, because your recipes are just amazing. So next myth for me then, which I hear all the time: you have to eat meat to get your protein. You've already touched on this in terms of, you thought that when you were younger. They're still teaching it in schools, I must say. That was Pumpkin, my cat, jumping up. And oh, Pumpkin, sorry everyone, he always jumps up when I'm recording and he's knocked my incense stick and everything over, but he's okay, everyone. So protein, you can only get it for meat. Bash that one for us, please.
Well, I completely understand it. I remember someone had mentioned to me that they were going to be going vegan for a bit, and my first instinct was to be like, oh, there's no way I could do that. I would wilt away. Like the image in my mind thought I would literally wilt away because I felt
Yeah.
like I needed to eat animal muscle to get protein. So I completely get it. It's been a very pervasive belief, and this is not to say that animal protein isn't good quality protein. Of course it is, because we see people who eat animal protein who are in very good shape. We're able to build quality muscle, but that's not the only way, where the only place you can get your protein from. And again, these are all these foods that I'm eating for protein now. I didn't even consider them whatsoever because they weren't on my radar. That no one had mentioned them to me. So like the organic, non-GMO tofus and tempehs of this world. You've got your beans, different types of beans. You've got your lentils, your chickpeas, edamame. There's like so many different ways to get plant protein. And yes, of course, there is a consideration where if you're just eating one source of plant protein all day, for example, if you're eating black beans all day, the likelihood is that you're going to maybe be lower in certain of the essential amino acids. So what you need to do is get a wide variety of plant protein in across the entire day. So for example, if I was to, outline a day of eating for me, it would maybe look like some protein oats. I'll put some protein powder in my oats, add some hemp seeds, which is a decent source of protein as well, and then some berries and nuts and other seeds. And then lunchtime might go for like a lentil bolognese with chickpea pasta or something like that. So you've got protein in the chickpea pasta, and that's another really interesting one. Sort of legume pastas, so like chickpea pasta, lentil pasta, green pea pasta. They've got like 24 grams of protein per 100 grams, whereas normal wheat protein has got maybe 12. So that's an easy way to bump up your protein. And then for dinner, I could do some kind of bowl where I could have, maybe some black beans, some organic tofu, maybe some quinoa or buckwheat or something like that, maybe some broccoli sprouts, avocado, hummus. And that's easily, easy another 40, 50 grams of protein in one meal. So, it's easy for me. I get around maybe 140 grams of protein a day quite easily. I maybe was eating too much back in the day. And what's interesting is that when I went plant-based, I think I was around 83, 84 kilograms. I'm now 95. So I've clearly had no problems with putting on lean muscle over the years. So yeah, again, it just takes a bit of understanding and a bit of, clarity on how to optimize your protein intake in terms of like amino acids and things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that should have been debunked a long time ago, I would have thought, but I guess it's still pervasive in some ways.
So much. And also what I find really fascinating is I don't think there's many meat eaters that would have that level of knowledge. I bet you if I'd have been speaking to you when you were eating a normal conventional meat and plant diet, I don't think you'd have been able to answer that question. I don't think you'd have known where a lot of it, just be it comes from meat. But so many people who are on a meat-based diet, they don't rotate their protein sources. They don't take care of where it comes from. So I'm not bashing any type of diet. I think everyone's got to choose what's right for them, health-wise, ethically, and also in terms of availability as well, in terms of what you can get hold of. Because, the next myth I want to come on to is humans were evolved to eat meat. And, well, we were evolved with my take on that before I ask you is there's lots of things that we used to do in the past that we no longer do now, and times have changed. And also I'm blessed to have a lot of choice about where I can get my food from.
Yeah.
Therefore, I have got the opportunity. Well, some people live in parts of the world where they haven't got choice, and therefore they'll have to make different choices.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think with that one, I think that it's almost like the appeal to nature fallacy, like, oh, our ancestors did this, so we should do it now. And again, it's all based on, like, firstly, none of us were even there, so we don't know exactly what they were doing. We can look at certain pieces of data from like evolutionary anthropologists or people in that field who might have done a bit of research into like the bones of these people back in the day and looking at what they ate and stuff. But you can never be sure, that you can never be definitive in any kind of way. And also, I think people back in the day weren't really eating to thrive and live to 70, 80, 90. They were eating for survival, really. And look, there's so many different schools of thought. You've got, people ate tons of fiber, or people ate tons of meat. I also think maybe your actual ancestry plays a part. So for me, my ancestry is Africa, and where it's hot, so there's obviously going to be a ton of fruits and vegetables, and probably not that much meat. But then if maybe you've got like a Northern European where it's maybe a bit colder, you might be looking to go for more meat and more animal fats. So things like that, I think, I've been able to kind of do really well on a plant-based diet. Others might not have been able to do that well, and that's actually right. But I think when you say, oh, we're supposed to eat meat, that kind of indicates that anyone who's on a plant-based diet is just going to wilt away, which isn't true. We're seeing so many people thriving, athletes performing at a high level. So again, it's never a case. I'm never like, oh, the plant-based diet is clearly better than this diet. I'm just saying, look, you can eat in a number of different ways. You know, plant-based diet clearly works for plenty of people. It's clearly worked for me for over half a decade. You know, I'm not gonna tell people not to eat meat. If you feel like you want to eat meat because that's what you want to do, fine. But it is what it is. And I think one of the funny ones that I always hear as well is when people talk about themselves and compare themselves to like lions. And
Yes.
I'm like, well, lions also kill their young. They
Yeah.
also, you know, they also do all this crazy stuff. But what, just because they eat meat, that means, you know, that you align with them. And if you also think about it, lions eat meat on sight. They're obligate carnivores.
Yeah.
Whereas humans will never, if a human saw roadkill on the road, they would never go up to it and eat it. They would never do that. So yeah, it's an interesting one, that one. If people want to just eat meat because they feel it's got nutrient density, which it does, then absolutely by all means do that. But don't start, you know, throwing out all of these, oh, I'm a lion or I'm supposed to eat meat and blah, 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 all this, you know, speculative stuff, because it doesn't really serve anyone.
I agree. You know, we're very lucky, a lot of us, to live in a time where we've got choices.
Yeah.
And also very lucky to live in a time where we've got access to a lot of this information, albeit there's a lot of misinformation out there as well. So you need to be cautious. So, right, the next myth. Again, I hear this all the time. You have to have dairy products to get your calcium.
Yeah. Again, it's some, I understand, you know, these are things that we've been taught from such a young age. And again, it all comes down to the circumstances. So if someone's living in maybe a low income area, dairy probably is actually the best source of calcium for them, because maybe they might not have the ability to go and buy or some of the other foods that I'm going to mention. But there is plenty of calcium in plant-based foods. You've got calcium set tofu, which is really easy to get a good amount of calcium from. Dark leafy greens like spinach and kale and Swiss chard, foods like that. You've got tahini, you know, calcium fortified plant-based milks are out there, or you can make your own plant-based milk and put calcified seaweed in there, which is what I do sometimes. So there's so many different options that you can do to get your calcium. Chickpeas as well, kidney beans. So again, it all comes down to education. This is what it all comes down to. It's not a case of people saying that, you know, dairy is the best source of calcium because they've evaluated everything. They're saying that because that's what they've been taught from their point of view. I said the exact same thing in 2014, 15, 16. Do you know what I mean? So I get it, but it's just about widening your perspective and opening yourself up to the fact that, okay, dairy is a good source of calcium, admittedly, but are there other sources of calcium that, if you have the options and you have the means, that you could potentially gain more health benefit from? So yeah, I think again, it's hard to, because I was in this position. I wasn't someone who was born vegan, because I understand the education that's been kind of leveled at us for so many years. I completely get why people say the things that they say about nutrition, because I said them once as well. So, and that's where it's actually quite important, just going off topic slightly, in terms of how you communicate with people who maybe aren't eating the same kind of way as you. You shouldn't be telling them, oh, you should do this or you should do that, because they're only speaking from their perspective and their viewpoint and their level of understanding. So in many ways, you have to kind of meet them where they're at, have a conversation with them, show them certain things, be an example of how to eat in a certain way. And that's going to give you more value. So yeah, it's a common misconception, common myth about calcium, but yeah, plenty of plant-based sources of calcium out there.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Now, you have already touched on the fact that you didn't used to cook a lot, and now anyone who goes to your Instagram page will see you are passionate about cooking. So before we get on to some of the actual health benefits you've noticed, tell us about some of the other benefits you've noticed, like the fact that you're now passionate about cooking fresh foods from scratch.
So yeah, I think the main, so if we go back to actually when I went plant-based, the benefits that I experienced. So literally after 2 weeks, I slept much deeper, I had more energy, I felt lighter physically, I had more mental clarity. And of course, as I said, I picked up this passion for just cooking and messing around in the kitchen and figuring out how to kind of shape meals and how to construct certain meals to be optimal, and to get benefit from them from a perspective of training and all these different types of things. And I think, again, just developing that overall passion for health. Because as I said, I could have maybe removed, some aspects of meat from my diet or even gone pescatarian and still probably had a level of knowledge that I would have wanted to, dive into and get comfortable with. But I guess it just so happened that for me, I just thought at the time, right, let's just go fully plant-based. And it worked really well for me. I mean, it would have been interesting to see what would have happened if it hadn't worked so well and I was like flagging and tired and things like that. Might have switched back, but I felt really good. And that was just so early. And I knew I was so very early in the process. And there were a couple of things that I did end up, not roadblocks, but certain kind of challenges that I faced where, I didn't realize that plant-based foods are less calorie dense than meat. So you need to add more volume of plants to your plate. Otherwise, you're just going to be in an unwanted calorie deficit. So I lost around maybe a kilo or two, but put that back on quite quickly once I realized that that was the case. So yeah, it was just really just developing. As I said, I have such a passion for health now overall. Plant-based nutrition is a big part of that, but other areas of health. So how can I optimize my sleep? Or, what are the best ways to optimize my training? Different supplements that I can use to enhance my training and my sleep and other areas of health, stress, mindfulness, and things like that. Because I do think health is a spectrum. It's almost like a pie chart. You've got so many different bits to add in there to complete the puzzle for yourself. So yeah, I've just become super passionate about all of these different areas of health with, of course, plant-based nutrition and recipes as a main focus, because I think that can be so beneficial for so many people.
Yeah. Have you found that you've introduced a lot more variety into your diet? Because a lot of people, particularly if they're working a long job, got a family to look after, it can be very difficult to look for inspiration. So did you find, because I'm asking this question because I did, that when I went plant-based, it made me research a lot more about what I was eating. And that very quickly turned into a passion for me that I just love it and am still learning every day now. I mean, how have you added variety into your diet? Because that's so important for our microbiome, isn't it?
Definitely. I think getting that kind of diversity of plants in, we're seeing so much value in terms of, how that can be beneficial for populating our gut bacteria, feeding the existing gut bacteria to then produce metabolites for us to, to promote health. And I think, yeah, getting that diversity in was, if I think back to then and how I was eating in, maybe 2016, 2017, and then compared to now, like the difference is remarkable. And of course, it's because for me, it's just an ongoing learning process. I came across, like, for example, sprouting in 2020. And I'm absolutely love sprouting. I'm sprouting all the time, broccoli sprouts, radish sprouts, mung bean, lentil sprouts, and getting those into your diet, a different type of fiber is going to benefit your gut microbiome as well. So yeah, the variety is so important. And I understand that, if people have got, kids, 3 or 4 kids, or they've got, a job that's forces them to work longer hours, it might be quite difficult. And you might end up finding yourself in a rut and wanting to do the same things because you're pressed for time. So I get that, and those circumstances are, you have to navigate them in a different way. What might work for me, who's not got a big family yet, might not work for someone who does at this very moment in time, and they've got to work out what's best for them. How can they cook healthier meals that take a shorter amount of time? So I guess that's one of the reasons why I create so many different recipes. I want to create so many things that can be applicable for people at different stages of their life. Whether you've got kids, I get lots of messages from people who say that, oh, I made this recipe and my kids loved it, and all these types of things. And I just find that really, really gratifying to be able to kind of contribute to people's lives in that way.
It's fantastic. And as a mum myself, I think it's so important to show that actually going back to sort of the traditional way of actually, when I grew up, my mum had to spend a lot of time in the kitchen because you had to cook everything from scratch.
Yeah.
Food. But in terms of other benefits like stress management, etc., it's absolutely fantastic. So there's a lot of knock-on benefits from those as well.
Yeah, definitely.
But if someone, I mean, obviously we've got veganuary, and a lot of the trouble is with that, it's great because it makes people think, but again, a lot of people will reach for the convenience. If someone was really thinking, right, whether for ethical reasons, for health reasons, whatever reason it might be, I really want to get into this, where would you suggest they start?
I would suggest that they start, because I don't think many people will be able to go cold turkey like I did. I think that's a big ask for a lot of people. I would say focus on one meal and getting that done in a whole food fashion. So even, for example, something like breakfast, oatmeal is one of the easiest things that you can do, one of the most nutritious if it's prepared properly, of course, and you know, go for maybe like organic or even sprouted oats if you can. And adding just so many different toppings like the pumpkin seeds, the hemp seeds, blueberries, which we all know are super beneficial for your brain and inflammation. And just make that a habit. See if you can perfect that, get that down to a T, and then maybe get 2 or 3 others kind of easy recipes under your belt. You know, maybe utilizing foods that you've kind of experienced with before. And then trying to just kind of incorporate them into different recipes and using the inspiration that's out there on social media. And also say that one of the biggest and most important things is to just accept that it's not going to be a lifestyle that's going to cater to convenience. If you want to do it properly and if you want to do it well and thrive, you have to get used to cooking. You have to get accustomed to the fact that you'll be cooking a lot more than you ever really would. But what that will do in turn is that will bring you closer to your food. I think cooking is one of the most powerful things that you can do. It's right, I'm taking control of everything that's going onto this, into this chopping board, into that frying pan, and then onto my plate, and then into my body. You know what's in there. And there's something really, really powerful about that. So I think that's really important that people understand that cooking is really the way forward. And you say veganuary is great and all that. I do, I've been making some recipes for veganuary, but there's something about the process side of things which makes people get a lot of value out of that. I was having a chat with someone who mentioned that they had a friend who was, what was happening. They said something along the lines of they wanted to replace their breakfast, their typical egg and bacon, and they went for vegan versions, and it was disgusting. And I was just like, you're actually probably better off eating the normal eggs to go for vegan eggs. Like, you got to change it up. You got to do like whether it's a scrambled tofu or some kind of sourdough with avocado and broccoli sprouts or whatever, oatmeal or a smoothie. Like, there's so many healthy vegan breakfast options. You don't need to go for these these vegan bacon and all this kind of stuff. It's just, for me, it's like, I understand why they're doing it. I get it, but for the long term, if you want to do this even beyond January and actually be healthy and thrive, I just don't see where the value long term in these foods is.
Yeah, absolutely. What about growing your own food? Because I saw your sprouting video on Instagram, and I think I mentioned you spoke before. So I've had my sprouting kit, and I've wanted to get in sprouting for ages, but it came with a great big booklet, and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And I saw your sprouting video on Instagram. I was like, oh, it's really that easy. I'm very excited because I want to sprout for my guinea pigs and rabbits and dogs.
Yeah.
So talk to us about that. I mean, you've learned a lot of new skills in this process, and a lot of people are talking about growing their own food, whether it's on a windowsill if you don't have a garden, or actually getting back into gardening again.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a show like not too long ago where people like growing food on their balcony and stuff and growing like fruits and vegetables and things like that. And I think that's great. And I think the thing about sprouting is that it's so easy, and it's just a really easy, quick way to grow some really nutritious food in the comfort of your own kitchen without really having to do that much. And I think with broccoli sprouts, we know there's so much benefit in terms of, detoxing excess estrogen, increasing the amount of sulforaphane in there, which is a really potent cancer-fighting compound, more fiber, vitamin C, really, really rich in nutrients. You've got radish sprouts and even things like lentil or mung bean sprouts, and adding those to meals are a really easy way to actually hike up your protein across the day. So yeah, and it's super easy. Literally, you get 2 tablespoons of broccoli sprouting seeds, you submerge them in water overnight, pull them out, and then for the next 5 days, you just rinse and drain the water, and then you've got sprouts right there 5 days later, ready to eat.
And it's really cheap as well, isn't it? You can do these things really cheaply. And like, once you get into the habit of it, and I tell you, children love doing this. So if you've got children, they're going to love doing this for you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I do, I don't have children yet, but when I do, I know what growing broccoli sprouts with them is definitely something that I'm going to do because I know they're going to love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So in terms of some of the things that you would say, what about where you get your food from? What tips have you got for people on that in terms of sourcing good quality ingredients and perhaps cost-saving tips, like buying in bulk?
Yeah, really good cost-saving tip actually for nuts and seeds. This is one thing that I always mention. So if you were to go and buy like a 400 or 500 milligram or 400 or 500 milligram pack of hemp seeds in the supermarket, it's not going to be that cheap. It's going to be quite expensive. for how much you're getting anyway. So the best thing to do is, wholesalers, like there's loads of different ones. So Whole Food Earth is a really good one. Forest Whole
Yeah, I
Foods,
use them.
yeah, they're really good. Forest Whole Foods is another good one. Buy your nuts and seeds and even your legumes in bulk. I've started buying my lentils and mung beans from there as well. So I get my lentils, mung beans, pumpkin seeds, goji berries, hemp seeds. I get all of those from wholesalers because it's just much cheaper. And then when it comes to, I tend to prefer to buy organic food, but I think I don't want that to be a barrier for people thinking that they have to buy organic or they shouldn't buy foods at all. Like buying conventional produce and washing it properly is much better than nothing at all. And if you can justify the cost of spending an extra however much it is to get your organic berries or whatever it is, then absolutely great, do that. But I don't think it should be something that you should always worry about, particularly if you're starting out. You shouldn't let too many things distract you. Try and go for, if you do go for conventional produce, just make sure you wash it thoroughly and then you're good to go.
Absolutely. And I love teaching people and helping people look at how they feed their cats and dogs and any of their animals. And again, I think that's such a good point you made there, Jeffrey, in terms of don't look for the obstacles, look at what you can do, what you can't.
Yeah.
One tip I do, because I buy in bulk, but luckily my neighbours as well. And so what we do is we'll buy quite a bulk thing and then share it between us as well, which is another good tip if you've got
That's
anyone
nice.
local to you or even family members or something.
Yeah.
And that really helps the whole community as well.
Yeah,
What
definitely.
I find is you don't have to do all the research yourself then, because they might be researching one thing and say, have you tried this? And then we'll try something else. We're quite lucky to have quite good gardens where I am, and I've got ponies, rescue ponies, so I've got a good supply of organic manure. So what we've done over the last couple of years is everyone's been growing different things, and we've been swapping between us.
Oh, nice.
With various degrees of success, I might add, but it's been quite a laugh anyway.
Yeah, yeah, it's good. Good community vibes.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things I wanted to make people aware of on your website, tell us about your website and some of the resources that you've got on there.
Yeah, so I started my website, when did I start? I think it was 2018, 2019, then I did a refresh in 2020. And it's really just a place where, if people want to find more kind of long form information about kind of issues around plant-based nutrition, where to get your iron from, plant-based sources of protein, things like foods to get, foods to optimize or increase immune function. You can find it there. And I've got my newsletter there as well. So I drop a weekly newsletter just, around sort of thoughts that I have around health, well-being, plant-based food, things like that. I've also got my ebook there. So the Eat More Plants ebook, which I brought out in 2021. So it's been nearly a couple of years since I brought that out, which is actually crazy. It's gone fast. So yeah, that was like my first kind of cookbook. It's on my website, and it was really just wanted to make it quite a simple offering for people, not because there's obviously you got these cookbooks that I've got like 50, 60, 70 recipes out there, can get quite overwhelming for people. And I wanted to call it Eat More Plants as well, because I didn't want to just restrict it to people who wanted to go plant-based. I have a lot of people in my community who I chat with who aren't vegan, and I'm not trying to turn them vegan, but they just like to get more plant-based foods into their diet, which is always a good starting point or always a good place to be from a health standpoint. So yeah, that's really kind of where the idea for the website came from, just to have that kind of central resource for people to check in with as and when they please.
It's got so much information. I'm going to obviously put the links below. It's the wealth of health, isn't it? And we've got your ebook, and it's absolutely brilliant. We've done, I think, all but one of the recipes in there.
Nice. Amazing.
And what I love about yours, as you say, they look beautiful and taste delicious, but you haven't overcomplicated it, because I've got so many plant-based cookbooks, and some of the ingredients I've never heard of, and I'm like, where do I get this from? However, I've now been doing it long enough where I'm really happy just to improvise, leave something out, add something extra in, use up what you've got, etc.
Definitely. I think one of the keys as well that I always mention to people is about, it's not the recipes that I create are almost like a guide.
Yes.
If you want to put something else that you want in there, put something else in there. It doesn't necessarily have to be exactly down to a T, mix it up, get some, and it encourages people to kind of get a bit of creativity in their own kind of cooking process. You start to think about certain ingredients that might go that you may not have, or, that you can replace certain things with. So yeah, I think that's a good way to look at things.
Yeah, brilliant. The other tip I love is, which I know you've spoken about quite a bit, is cooking extra so that you can take it for lunch the next day and things like that. So that's so easy. I mean, once you get into the habit of doing these, sort of bulk it out a bit more. Personally, I love the fact that we can eat more as plant-based.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You can eat
love my food.
Yeah, you can eat more and you're not going to overdo it with the calories because you can't. You'll get full, plenty of fiber if you're getting good plant-based protein in there as well. So yeah, I enjoy loading up my plates.
Yeah. One more myth I wanted you to cover, because this is said a lot, is that, all the food's so bland. And I think this comes from the fact that if you eat out, I mean, certainly where I am, still it's very difficult to get anything different from plant-based. So how are you finding the blandness of the food compared to what you used to eat?
Well, it's about herbs and spices. And here's the interesting thing, like I just kind of thought about this. So a lot of the majority of people's first experience with trying a vegan meal or trying a plant-based meal is when they go out to restaurants.
Yeah.
And you think about over the years, like obviously in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, I think we've probably been quite blessed in terms of, a lot of these really good plant-based restaurants appearing. But even restaurants that aren't plant-based are starting to put energy and effort into their plant-based options. So they've got some taste and good value. But like I'd say 6 or 7 years ago, a restaurant that wasn't plant-based would just put something on the menu that's vegan, that probably didn't taste all that great, that didn't have much flavoring or seasoning, just so they've got that there. Someone then goes to try that option. They don't like the taste. It's bland. They then form that picture in their head that all vegan food is bland based off of that one experience. Completely understand that. But it comes down to it comes down to this. It's all about herbs and spices. It's all about adding flavor, adding, aromatics with onion and garlic and, all these different foods, ginger, putting them in your food. That's what's going to give you the taste. I was saying on Twitter the other day, when it comes down to, for example, meat, it's not the fact that it's the flesh that tastes good, because no one likes the taste of uncooked flesh or like unseasoned flesh. No one likes that. But it's the herbs, it's the spices, it's the aromatics, these things that elevate that chicken to taste like that. So of course, if you go to a Chinese restaurant and you have a bland piece of tofu that's like soggy, that's not got much flavor on it, of course you're going to hate tofu. But then if you do an extra firm tofu, organic of course, and then you add some liquid smoke, a bit of olive oil, some garlic pepper, some paprika, cayenne pepper, let that marinate and then cook that, you're going to get a completely different taste experience. So it's about how you prepare your food. It's about how you season your food. And that will answer the question about, why people find, plant-based food so bland. You need to just season it. Treat your vegetables like you would treat your meat. As simple as that.
Exactly. And there's so many health benefits of these herbs and spices, aren't there?
Exactly.
Once you start, I'm a herbalist, so I love my herbs.
Yeah.
But when people start looking in and adding them and getting creative, and this is how we learn, isn't it? Trial and error.
Exactly.
And it is good fun, isn't it? I can see that you have real fun with what you're doing. I mean, videos.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. It's a fun process, and as I said, spices and herbs that I'd never really got involved with. Like for me, one of the best ones is cinnamon. Great for blood sugar control. Blood sugar or blood two. Anyway, blood sugar. And it almost like for people who maybe struggle with, I guess, the taste of transitioning, cinnamon's a great one to get into like oat, because it almost gives you that almost like a sweet flavor as well. Combine that with banana and you're onto a winner.
Exactly. And you will find, I mean, I do this a lot when people are transitioning their animals. I just prefer working with anything that's got a tail. But the thing is when you're used to certain diets, the microbiome in your mouth and in your body makes you crave certain things. And as you start introducing more variety, you'll find your taste changes so much. There's so many people that I know have absolutely hated like a green shot or a celery juice. And then a month later, they're just craving it because their body like, give me more. So would you advise people to, and not be too put off if they try something for the first time, if they think it's going to be something that suits them, persevere?
You have to persevere. You have to give your taste buds time to turn over. It takes, I think there was a study that I saw where the more you expose yourself to a lot of these bitter foods, it changes the proteins in the saliva, which means that you then actually start to become adjusted to these foods. I think this was a study in rats, I believe. And of course, whilst we're not rats, that's actually quite interesting to see how mammalian, taste buds can actually change and adapt based on the foods that you're exposed to. So you have to keep giving yourself time. You can't just be like one meal, one and done. I'm not interested anymore. You have to allow that process to unfold over time. And because it's very hard. You got to remember, like, people's palates have been hijacked by ultra processed food for years.
Yeah.
This is something that is not going to be erased or eradicated overnight or in the space of even a week. You have to allow yourself that time to your taste buds to turn over, get used to these different types of foods that you're consuming, and you will eventually come to love them. And of course, you have to add like different herbs and spices to make them taste good as well.
Fantastic. So what's next for you then? What's this year got planned?
What have I got this year? So again, just continuing to grow out the community. I am working on a project. I probably can't talk too much about that at the moment, but that's something that I'm really excited about potentially. What else? I want to, yeah, just more talks, more events, just kind of continuing to bring the ethos of plant-based food and plant-based living to people. And yeah, that's kind of really it at the moment. Early days, it's only January, so I'm sure we've got plenty of time for things to unfold.
Exactly. And, as I said, I know I've mentioned it a few times, but your Instagram, if anyone, the links will be below, go there and look about how beautiful these foods are. You show a lot of health education as well, so people can get tips about, why this might be something they want to incorporate into their diet, and, how they can start using ingredients more creatively. And then your website, which again, the link will be below, that ebook is fantastic. And I think I love the fact that you just haven't got too many recipes in there, because I had a couple of books that sat on my shelf for 2 years, because every time I opened them, I was like, oh, too
Yeah, you know where to start. It's overwhelming for some people.
Yeah, so start simple and have fun. Any
Definitely.
final words you want to leave people if they're sort of, thinking, should I do this? My health's not quite optimum. Should I give it a go? Any final words?
I mean, what I would say from a health standpoint, I wouldn't say, I'd say to people, don't expect it to be a magic bullet. There's plenty of people who have maybe gone plant-based and it hasn't really quite worked for them. The health's a spectrum. You've got to do so many things. Getting your diet right is one of the best things you can do. Then you've got to think about your training. Then you've got to think about how you're sleeping, how you're managing your stress. Are you doing, getting your nutrient intake right? But if you are to go and do it, go slow. Just try, as I said, 1 or 2 recipes, get those under your belt, branch out that way. Allow your taste buds time to turn over, get comfortable with the process of cooking. And if you do that and you really treat it as a lifestyle as opposed to a restrictive diet, as some people try to paint it, I think, for the majority of people out there, you'll get some good value from it. So it's best to look at it that way.
I love it. I don't see it as restrictive at all for me. I just see it as just introducing more choice and also giving me a kick up the backside to not be lazy. Because I must admit, I go through stages where I can be quite lazy and think, oh, I can't be bothered to do this. But every time I get in the kitchen and start creating, I love it. I really, really enjoy it.
Yeah.
My presentation is not as good as yours, but it's not my strong point. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I have learned a lot. I think it's really important to have, what I love about you, as you said, you're not trying to force your ideas about anything down someone else. You're just sharing what works for you and what fun this creative process can be and how it can impact your health and lifestyle. Ethics, if that's important. For me, it was an ethical decision, but I wasn't prepared to make an ethical decision that compromised my health. So they went hand with it. So I think it's good for people to challenge their beliefs now and again and challenge, take a look, particularly at the new year. A lot of people take a look and, okay, they come up with New Year's resolutions, but taking a really honest look at your lives and sort of saying, how am I doing health-wise? Energy-wise? Is there something I do want to change my life? And if so, this might be a good starter point for them.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, there's so many different ways in which we can approach a plant-based diet, and just being open to it. And as you say, challenging your beliefs. And it might not even necessarily be a case of going fully plant-based. You can dip your toe in the water, can go majority plant-based and see where it takes you. But I think the most important thing is to just be conscious, start to become conscious, as you say, about where your health is, how are your energy levels? How do you feel in the gym? How do you feel day to day? Do you need coffee to, wake yourself up? So just having that consciousness and that awareness and that discernment of how you are from a health standpoint will only put you in good stead.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today. I have absolutely loved it. All Jeffrey's links will be below, and hopefully I might be able to encourage you to come back again. Any questions, folks, feel free to ask in the comments, because we do always look through those. Thank you, Jeffrey.
A pleasure. Thank you.